Yes, friends, it's OGP, the one giant podcast where, as you know it, we are your host over here, Adam Armbrecht, also covering the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast all off season for them, not in the playoffs, shockingly. And over there, it's the healthy, wealthy, and wise one, Mr. Andrew Mackiewicz.
Adam, I love it. We were talking earlier this week about the offensive scheme between Daboll and Kafka. Surprisingly, we still don't know for certain who's going to be playing calls. It seems like there's going to be a little mesh. And if you haven't listened to that episode, give it a listen because we talk about, either one potentially being good for the Giants. But what are we talking about today, my friend?
Yeah, we're going to get back into that too because we realized as we were going through that episode how much more there is to mine there. So once we get out of the rookie mini training camp, give us a little bit more information, potentially just some insight. We'll get some takeaways on like a Wan'Dale Robinson and maybe some of these other young players as well. But why not then today flip it over to the other side of the ball where obviously Wink Martindale is in charge of reclamating the defensive unit for Big Blue. Earlier in the week, we also, as everybody knows, if you follow the New York Football Giants, released James Bradberry. And so the question immediately becomes, first and foremost, before we talk about obviously Thibodeaux and some of the holdovers and how this defense is going to function successfully, who replaces James Bradberry for the New York Football Giants?
Great question. And we'll probably have different answers to that one, Adam, potentially. But let's just go with what ESPN or any of the depth charts that have been updated this week since the release of James Bradberry. We know Adoree Jackson will be on one side of the field.
Yes, sir.
Who do they have listed as the other starting cornerback?
I would say, and this doesn't mean it's my preference. I'm excited about it. I'm intrigued about it. It has to be Flott because he is the rookie draft pick for this regime. So nobody else can be out there. It can't be Aaron Robinson because he's a holdover. Maybe we think he should be out there, but it has to be Cordell Flott.
You would be correct.
Come on.
I would have been wrong, and I would have thought that they would have moved Aaron Robinson up. Aaron Robinson is listed as the third string quarterbacks. They actually have Darnay Holmes and Rodarius Williams listed as the backups right now. Is that surprising to you that Aaron Robinson is still listed so far down, knowing that both Holmes and Rodarius Williams are coming off of injuries too?
Well, let's put it this way. First of all, it's ESPN, right? Because the Giants aren't going to put out any official depth chart anytime soon. So it's speculative, certainly. And I think from that standpoint, you're going with the guy again. You're going with this team's, this regime's, this coaching staff's pick, right? Wink Martindale liked Cordell Flott, so that's why you're going to list him there. And listen, let's just go by what Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen have said. We want reliability, we want consistency, we want guys to go out there and earn their spots. If I'm walking into training camp and rookie minicamp and into the offseason, Cordell Flott has the inside track to whatever role he's going to have. He's the guy that gets to win his spot first, and then everybody else, all the holdovers, they have to show that they can take that spot away from him. I think this would be the right way to approach it under Wink Martindale.
Yeah, I see. That's interesting because I have a different viewpoint where I just don't want a young draft pick to get eaten alive right away. I feel like you put one of the other veterans in there to start and have Cordell Flott learn a little bit, and then have the Giants say, we were so impressed with Cordell Flott that he has taken the reins and taken the cornerback position. It's almost like, it's tough to go back and then bench him or move him over because he's struggling early as a rookie. So what you're saying is like, we're kind of okay with Cordell Flott struggling early on, and we won't have a quick trigger to be able to pull him for a guy like Rodarius Williams.
Well, no, and again, but like I look at it as like the secondary as a whole. Cordell Flott is up there on the list of names. Does it mean he ends up playing a lot of slot? Just over to some nickel coverage? Yeah, of course he does, right? But like confidence. We drafted this kid for a reason. We want him to walk into camp feeling like we drafted you to be our starting cornerback. We didn't draft you to then say, well, last year there's a couple of injured guys that we think could be pretty good. And again, as we look into Wink Martindale's system a bit here, we're going to start from the front of this defensive unit and then work our way towards the back. It's all going to be fluid. I get your point, right? Like, hey, he really showed us something. But remember, as of this moment, you need everybody to kind of show you something, right? Like you need Aaron Robinson to show you something. You need Rodarius Williams to show you something. You may need Darnay Holmes, someone we talked about previously, is saying he might be one of the first cut candidates. We need him to show you something. And then even on the back end, like a guy like Belton, right? Like we want to see something. I won't be shocked if when we talk, let's talk briefly here again about the back end of this unit. When you talk about safeties, Julian Love is listed ahead of Belton. I think your dream scenario would be over the course of training camp to have exactly what you said play out. You know what? Listen, Dane's really impressed us with what he can do on the field. Very versatile player. That's why we're rewarding him, right? With the second safety position there, even though a lot of single highs, we talk defensive scheme with Wink Martindale, this kid has earned it over a Julian Love. So let's push the pause button on the back end of this thing because we see right there a lot of questions, a lot of curiosities, a lot of excitement, a lot of young players. But if we're talking about Wink Martindale and needing those weapons in the secondary to have success, the first thing that you're going to say is, what can Kayvon Thibodeaux do for you? Because for Big Blue, he represents more. I mean, you heard OCU and Ura come out and say, I see a lot of me in Kayvon Thibodeaux. We've heard Michael Strahan connected with him before the draft and is now very much going to be helping him grow in this big media market that is New York and hopefully on the field too. It's more than just getting after the quarterback off the edge, though, for Kayvon Thibodeaux.
It is. I mean, he is a freak athlete. He is a wrecker. He is super athletic. He can even if it's a running back out in space, Adam, he has the ability to track him and tackle him.
Yeah.
That's how just his pure athleticism makes him a freak of nature. You know, the one thing that I was thinking about, and this might be slightly off tangent, is
Talk to
like
me, Biff.
the offense was so bad last year
I'm
that
with you so
the
far.
team the defense was on the field so much of the time because the Giants couldn't hold possession or move the ball. And so it exposed some of the warts that defense had. I don't necessarily know if the defense was as bad as it showed out to be last season because they were like, hey, we have to stop them every single time because our offense can't move the ball. We're averaging a league low, like 16 points a game. I'm just thinking instantly, we mentioned the offense and the scheme getting better. Them getting better means that guys like Kayvon Thibodeaux are going to be even more critical to success because you're asking him like one or two big plays from Kayvon Thibodeaux a game could mean the difference between a win or loss, this upcoming season.
Yeah.
Previously, Thibodeaux would have to be all over the place and be perfect on every single play just to get off the field.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting to your point, right? Like, I can remember instances last year where the Giants defense got a turnover, and unfortunately, it ended up being a 3-and-out for the New York Football Giants offense, right? So all of the win comes out of that sales, all of the reward, getting points on the board, right? And really moving the needle as far as how a game script can go. But to your point, it doesn't have to be turnovers, but getting off the field, a couple of key moments where then hopefully this offense can reward you. And when you look at Kayvon Thibodeaux, as we say, in Wink Martindale's system, and you heard him talk about already interviewing with Bob Papa this offseason saying, well, listen, bringing pressure comes in a lot of different ways. It's not just, well, we have Kayvon Thibodeaux now. We know we're going to talk about Azeez Ojulari here in a second, and those guys are coming for you. They're coming off the edge. They're going. No, he already said you can see Thibodeaux line up on the interior. You can see him dropping back into coverage and safety blitzes, cornerback blitzes off the edge, right? Bringing pressure up the gut with the linebacking core. So the reason why Thibodeaux becomes so valuable is, let's say it's going to be a run blitz look where you want for right now. Blake Martinez is busting up the gut there, and you have Tay Crowder. Let's just live with the current roster constructed, not about who we think should be starting. Now now Tay Crowder is trying to cover the running back out of the backfield. As that pressure comes, or maybe he's going on the blitz too, right? Extra blitzers coming. Who's picking up the tight end? Who's picking up the running back out of the backfield? Kayvon Thibodeaux has the ability to pick up and run with those options for the opposing quarterback. That is not a dynamic that the New York Football Giants have had there before. For so many years, we've talked about, God, can we have a linebacker that legitimately can go into coverage? Blake Martinez, how good is he in run support? But good Lord, please don't let him get caught against the tight end, right? Those concepts defensively really get reduced down to a very narrow window, let alone if you start to swap out personnel, as we saw the Giants do so much, right? We need someone who can cover. Okay, bring in the new package. Every time you do that, it's a signal to the offense. Watch out. They're trying to defend against the pass here. They're ready to stuff the run, and you can build your offensive looks off of that. So Thibodeaux is an edge rusher. He's a guy getting after the quarterback, but he's also the wrinkle that will afford Wink Martindale to do a lot of things off of him.
Well, I think we talk about the stats also for Leonard Williams just on the defensive line, Adam, and how like
Talk about up front here. This matters.
Yeah, because we talk about you don't see the sacks show up. There's not a huge sack number for some of these guys, but there's a lot of pressures in the backfield. That's one of the things that we've held our hat on Leonard Williams. Outside of the year that he gets his big contract from the Giants. But what I think is interesting is we had Lorenzo Carter last year. We've had a whole host of different guys come in and out off of the edge that have come and gone from, in that position. Um, what I think about, I was thinking Kyler Fackrell came to my mind in the back of my head, like situational guys that can get you 3 or 4 sacks, but like you don't really even need to scheme for them. A big tight end might be able to block them. That's not going to be the case anymore when you talk about Kayvon Thibodeaux and on the other side, Azeez Ojulari being there. Teams are going to have to account for them, which means Leonard Williams isn't going to get doubled. It means Dexter Lawrence has the ability to get more single, pushes through the line. I think when you think about the front line and then you think about the two edge rushers, it's instantly going to be better with the impact of someone like Kayvon Thibodeaux there.
Yeah, and then just to touch on the defensive front, and then we'll swing out to the other side there with Azeez Ojulari. You mentioned Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams for that matter. Again, I was a fan of Lorenzo Carter, right? But when you think about taking him out and putting Thibodeaux in his place, you understand how much more dynamic you become. What difference does that make on plays where Leonard Williams is doing his job, occupying one or two offensive linemen and maybe pushing that side of the line towards the quarterback, but you don't have the speed and quickness off the edge to close the gap and really put the final pressure on that quarterback, right? Thibodeaux can do that now. Dexter Lawrence, we talked about how he started out as a nose tackle when he was drafted, then got moved to the outside in the 3-4. I think that you're going to see more of him over the nose again in this system with Wink Martindale. Again, versatility, being able to line up players in different positions based on matchups and where you think they can have the best success against the opposition. On the other side across then from Thibodeaux, though, is obviously Azeez Ojulari. When we look at him, this kid already had a strong rookie season, right? In spite of all the things we're talking about in terms of what went well for the Giants or not, and how this unit would listen, they suffered some injuries too, but just the talent level. Do you think that Azeez is capable of being that high level complement? Because this is one thing we always talk about, the carryover, right? Guys that came over from the Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge era, they don't have a necessarily an automatic path forward. We all feel really good about him falling to the Giants in the second round. I, at least, I'm not speaking for you, believe that he is going to be a big piece of what the Giants do going forward. Was it critical in some ways to have Thibodeaux be that complement because Azeez is not the pure freak athlete that we got here at the pick number 5 in this draft?
Well, you mentioned not being a freak athlete. He is very athletic. There
Yes,
was injury concerns about him, which kind of pushed him down. He is athletic, but I don't know if it necessarily has fully shown up on tape. There is good and there is bad with Azeez Ojulari, and I know we want to be very positive, and I do feel positive about it. The good, 10 sacks. He finished 17th in the league in sacks as a rookie. That is incredible. Now, when you think about he was potentially the focal point, being one of those outside edge rushers, you put someone like Thibodeaux, who is even more of a freak athlete, who has the power and strength to make teams have to scheme against him. That
yep.
means that they may actually be putting Azeez in better situations to get more sacks. I think overall, Azeez, if he can be more versatile in Wink Martindale's system, not just getting to the quarterback, but you mentioned Kayvon Thibodeaux being able to cover a little bit better, tackle a little bit better. If Azeez can round out those portions of his game, he can be a nice 1A complement to Thibodeaux as a 1.
Yeah, you know what? You talk about versatility, man. Say different places to line up. Don't be surprised if Azeez comes from the inside on some of these looks too, right? This 3-4 scheme that we're talking about. It doesn't always have to be that these two traditional players are coming at you from the outside. I don't know if right now, when you look over the depth chart, you'd say, Baltimore, that Wink Martindale can bring some concepts from Baltimore in terms of, well, maybe a fourth guy puts his hand down in the dirt, right? Do the Giants have enough of those bodies right now in this moment to feel confident about that? Maybe not, right? You could shuffle this line down a little bit, but it'll be interesting. And to your point, it's fascinating because I think Azeez showed you a lot of really positive things. It took him a little bit time to get his feet underneath him, as you say, coming off the injury from his previous year in college. I'll be curious to see how he hits the ground running in Martindale's system, right? Because on the one hand, you look at the stats and you go, come on now, pop the top on this, right? And then you add someone like Thibodeaux and it really opens it up. He's one to watch, right? Like, does he have, he is athletic. Is he athletic enough to do all the things all the time? Because I think one of before we talk about getting to the secondary now and what we may expect from a free agent market in this offseason for the Giants, you want to be able to have the guy on the field all the time, right? Too much of what the Giants have had to do has said personnel packages, and the defense is predicated on that. We get that. You want to rotate and keep guys fresh, but you need to know that it's not about is it a run, is it a rush down, is it a pass down? No, no, no. These certain players are always there to make the big plays in the big moments, and that's what Azeez needs to show us here in year number 2. And if he does combine with Thibodeaux, then really the sky becomes the limit there as we look back to the responsibilities of this secondary.
The last thing I'll say, the last thing I'll say about the linebacking position, Adam, is I'm going to be surprised to see what happens over the next couple of months in terms of Oshane Ximines. I think, the running joke after Thibodeaux got drafted by the Giants is that I saw on Twitter a bunch of people put it, Oshane Ximines hasn't sacked a quarterback since 2019. And he's been on the roster for 2 years after that. So, like, if he is going to be a rotational piece, you mentioned Azeez Ojulari being able to do it all. If they're going to have to give him a breather and you're going to have a guy come in to be able to get some sacks, get some pressure, we feel okay about Roche. I think he's a good rotational piece. I'm looking at Oshane Ximines saying, if you can't bring it in training camp and you've been a holdover that's been disappointing, will you even be here with all the new players that we've brought in?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about him because I agree with you, right? He hasn't shown up, and he's still on the roster. We know he can offer some cap relief if they need it. But when you look inside of it, as you say, it's Azeez and then it's Oshane. Now, behind them, if you talk about just from the depth chart perspective right now, you mentioned Quincy Roche, Cam Brown, Ellerson Smith. We know injuries last year. That's it. That's kind of where the list ends, right? You go on the inside and you have McFadden and Beavers. And again, versatility. Where can some of these players line up potentially for the Giants? I wonder how much of a line the Giants will walk of, hey, is there a guy in the market? Is there a veteran we like? Or is at least what this kid is, what Oshane Ximines represents? Is he worth the depth, right? And is that why you hold on to him? I think anyone can take his job in camp. I think a free agent can come on the market. But he over any of these guys, even over a Cam Brown or any of the we call back end roster players, I think they're far safer than Oshane Ximines, predicated on where he was drafted, expectations, and maybe not achieving them. Although, this could be the Wink Martindale effect, right? I get it. I saw what he was as a prospect. I can still get something out of him, even in the short term over this year.
But to your point, they may be able to save money there and keep a guy like Cam Brown or Ellison Smith, release, Ximines, because, Adam, to your point, the secondary is a little bit in flux with this James Bradberry situation and the depth at safety in the moment.
And that's when we said at the top there about Wink Martindale needs weapons. So a reason why you might let go of an Oshane Ximines is because we feel healthier in those units. We're on the back end. How much mystery do you want to have in this defensive unit? Does Flott show up in training camp and tell you that he's worth starting on the outside? Or does Aaron Robinson earn that? Now all of a sudden you have this really healthy mix of players in the secondary. It's been reported, speculated, all but assumed. I mentioned this earlier in the week on the live stream during James Bradberry's release, that there are going to be names out there. Giants fans are already throwing names out there. Jimmy Smith is one of them, 33 years old, played in Baltimore, has experience with Wink Martindale. That to me is a teacher. That's a communicator of the system to some of these young players. But name a guy. Go ahead, Andy. You have the list in front of you. Name a free agent cornerback target that you go, hey, here. Not only that, first name all the guys you don't want, because that list is a far more interesting one, at least from the standpoint of a lot of these names, and it doesn't mean that that's a good thing for the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because there's household names that you've heard of, like Joe Hayden, who's 33, played for Pittsburgh and played for Cleveland. Feels like he lost a little bit of a step.
Sure.
You're talking about Kyle Fuller, who's 30 years old. He played at Denver. I see a lot of Giant fans getting excited about him. He just hasn't been great. He just hasn't been good. I know he had a couple of years that were solid, and then last year kind of fell off a cliff, hoping maybe you could revitalize something there. Even a guy like Xavier Rhodes. So you look at Xavier Rhodes as a name from Indianapolis. He's 31, going to be 32. You're like, wow, he could be great. Adam, he is best. He revitalized his career playing in zone coverage for the Indianapolis Colts. They were thinking about outright releasing him because he couldn't play man-to-man. They changed the scheme around. They're like, look at the resurgence of Xavier Rhodes. It's like, well, great. We don't play that much zone coverage, so a guy like Xavier Rhodes isn't going to be there. To your point, with all these names, you can find issues with all of them. The one name that comes to mind for me, and I heard you mention pre-show that you weren't a fan of him, is AJ Boye, is the one person that I think at least can come in and be competent. Look, he performs pretty well in man coverage. He plays zone and man. He also actually had a better Pro Football Focus rating than James Bradberry did last year at a 66.8. So it's not like he's completely fallen off a cliff. He may not be a great cornerback,
Yeah.
but for veteran depth and a guy that you need to bring in there who's been in the league for 8 or 9 years that can help this team transition over to their youth movement, I think he would be the perfect type of player to bring in on a cheaper deal if he's willing to come in and do that.
Yeah, and so and again, Boye might be like one of the better ones when you talk about age. The thing for me is, well, let's clarify one thing, right? If you're looking for situational football player and James Bradberry didn't cost the number that it did against the cap, the Giants just would have kept James Bradberry, right?
Right.
They would have said, hey, listen, not so good in man, can do some zone things for us. All right, that's fine. It's just the number and all of the obviously terrible situations that the Giants were left with coming into this new regime. I like Boye. I think, and this is, I'm not being, this is a mile wide and an inch deep here. When you talk about had a really nice PFF grade last year, yeah, but go back to 2019 where he only graded out at 58, right? Go back to 2020 then where he only graded out as a 55 and gave up 23 receptions on 36 total targets, some smaller sample sizes, etc. I think my concern, and this is again for the entirety, and this is my perspective on the defense and where this team is right now. If you bring in a Boye because, again, you think he has something left in the tank, he can do some things for you, that's awesome. But one, he's 30, 31 years old. So, are you picking up a guy right as he's about to fall off a cliff? And that's fine if the deal is right. But tell me the value, right? If these guys in camp, and really the question becomes around an Aaron Robinson, even a Darnay Holmes or a Darius Williams, like that's the question is, can these players that they have on the roster and the young players that are holdovers, if they can show me in training camp that they can get the concepts and they can be effective and that the ceiling is still unknown for them, I'd rather just play them than bring in a guy that you feel like I know what the ceiling is. And there's a world where we're not entirely sure what the floor is. Now, it doesn't mean that a guy like Boye can't stem the tide for the first few weeks of the season until someone's ready to take over for him. That part is totally valid and worth doing. But I just, where this team is right now, play the young guys. Let them learn and grow. You mentioned the top. Are you concerned about stunting Flott if he gets out there and he takes big lumps? Well, guess what, man? If you can't take the lumps and turn it over, as cornerbacks always say, right? I'm a play to play. I give up a touchdown. I come right back thinking I can shut down that guy in the next play. If you don't have that mentality coming in the league, you're going to be out no matter what.
Well, I agree with that. The one thing that I keep going back to, which is imprinted and seared in my mind, is Wink Martindale last year. His team was decimated with injuries, right?
Yep.
They were actually decimated at the cornerback position, which forced him out of the coverages that he likes to play most.
Mm-hmm.
And he was forced to put 2, even 3 safeties on the field at any given time because he just didn't have bodies. Like he was literally picking people off the practice squad and doing other things. We clearly need another cornerback body because he likes to use many of them rotationally. Yeah. And so for me, we're going to pick up one of them. We're going to pick up a veteran free agent on the market. That is going to happen. And so when we think about that, I at least want a guy that I know, can play a little bit of man coverage in a pinch, has shown that he was okay last season. Is 30, 31 is getting up there in age, but we're not looking for him to be the long-term stopgap. But I want to bring him into camp so that he can learn under Wink Martindale's system and not just pull him off the street week 5 because we have 2 injuries to Rodarius Williams and someone else. And all of a sudden, Wink Martindale's like, I'm in the same situation that I was before where I have no cornerback support.
Yeah. Listen, it's fair. As I said, I can't knock it. It's just really what it comes down to. It's as we'll go ahead and frame it this way on a what I guess I'll refer to as a pitiful at the end of the day here for the New York Football Giants. It's just the free agent class is not inspiring at that position, right? So at that point, and they have a couple of safeties. We mentioned obviously talking about the undrafted class there. There's a couple of cornerbacks, extra one out of LSU. We know about the safety that's going to get into that mix there as well. But right now, when you look over at the depth chart and they only have 6 active bodies there in the cornerback room, you want to add in, obviously, with the 3 safeties currently on the roster, they have 9. I think you want to have a dozen names, and there are guys coming off the undrafted free agent there that could be an impact here. You probably want to have a dozen guys. And to your point, if that's bringing in, and this is the best part about it. Best part about it is you want to bring in a veteran, go ahead. What you also want to do is wait to see who gets cut, right? Because other teams that are deeper teams, that are better teams, that can afford to say, oh, veteran back end kind of guy, well, we're going to cut you because we want our rookie to be the third guy in the depth chart for developmental talent. The Giants can say, you know, what we would love is to have any depth on our team, and we can pick that guy up. So I think there'll be other names here. Having Boye as maybe being one of the top ones is certainly fine right now, but I won't be shocked if I can give you 3 or 4 another month from now that I say, if you can go get this guy for the right price, he'll make a lot of sense for Wink.
And Adam, at the end of the day, Yusuf Corker, the safety that went undrafted, as you just
Thank
mentioned
you. The
before,
name escaped me. Yusuf Corker, I think, is a big name to watch here.
he is a very big name. He will likely make this roster with
Yeah.
with his athleticism and the way that he gets after people. If he makes the roster at the safety position, don't be surprised. And I haven't read it yet, but I'm calling it now. Don't be surprised if they end up looking at Julian Love again and saying, I know we've played this like back and forth, whether you're a cornerback or a safety.
Yeah.
Maybe for our versatility purposes, you can come up and play cornerback in a pinch for us. And that actually makes the team better overall than cutting Julian Love, bring up Yusuf Corker, and signing AJ Boyle off the street.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to close it out, man. Put Julian Love as your depth piece behind several other spots. He's not starting anywhere, but he's there in case you need him. We understand his limitations, but he also has special teams value. He has safety value. No reason to cut ties before you're ready. And he's still young, right? So whatever we think he could be, there's still probably better value there than with a veteran off the scrap heap that arguably, again, by the middle of the season, you say, I don't know, what are we doing here, friends? What we're doing here, friends, is letting you know that we're doing this exact thing all off season long, breaking down where we think this team can go, what they can accomplish. And as we know, coming up on Friday, the mini camp kicks off. That'll be a Monday conversation, most likely breaking down some takeaways that we get from that. The schedule release will be here Thursday night. So we'll do that live on YouTube. You can join me and Pessimistic Mike talking about wins and losses and how the schedule breaks down and why the Giants again got screwed. You can get the podcast where we get those needs fulfilled. The numbers on YouTube have been fantastic. We appreciate so much the support that we've been seeing there. So keep doing that. We'll keep cranking out the content. And as Andy Mackiewicz would want, need, and demand that people know,
as always, let's go Big Blue.